Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, February 18th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the National Republican Senatorial Committee that has released their overall list, their initial targets for the 2022 United States Senate elections. They've been pretty much fundraising and advertising in order to win back control of the United States Senate, and they've listed out a number of senators, a total of 6 senators that they are heavily targeting for the 2022 Senate race. Now, some of these I expect to drop off the list, and you will expect that as you start to see which ones are being targeted. But this is largely due to the fact that the 2022 Senate map does not favor the Republican Party the same way that the 2020 Senate map did or the 2018 Senate map did. What happens in 2022 is essentially a lot of the states for the Democratic Party are already considered safe. States that are previously competitive that are no longer competitive for the GOP. That means states such as Colorado, which might have been competitive 6 years ago, no longer are due to the state's overwhelming shift to the left. And looking at the 45 solid Democratic states, there are 2 of which out of this entirety that are considered to be targets by the National Republican Senatorial Committee. I'm just going to say the NRSC. It's easier to say. They go by the National Republicans. It's a body that's focused on just electing Republican senators. And of course, looking at the target list, what we actually have to do is characterize the current composition in the United States Senate, which is 50-50. This is the first time we've seen a tie since 2001. So looking at the composition state by state, it ultimately brings us to a 50-50 tie in the United States Senate. Republicans have control in certain states that were won by Joe Biden. Democrats having control of states that were won, actually not by Donald Trump, but won by Republicans previously and Donald Trump in 2016. But looking at our Senate map, we're at 50-50 with a total of 34 races that are in contention outside of the current delegation. And looking what's up in 2022, there aren't too many opportunities for the Republican Party. So what we are going to be doing is looking at some of these states and talking about why they may be on the target list and why some of these are very easily on the target list due to just common sense, because it makes sense that some of these races are considered to be competitive for the Democratic Party heading into the 2022 midterm election year. So the first state that we are going to be taking a look at is actually the state of Arizona. Mark Kelley is prime target number 1, number 2, number 3 amongst the most competitive races that are being targeted currently by the NRSC. And overall, looking at Arizona, Mark Kelley was certainly expected to win. But he was expected to win by a larger margin than he actually did. I don't know if this will take us. It will take us all the way up to 2020. So let's go ahead and just move it up there. But 2016 was when John McCain won this exact Senate race. He won it by over 10 percentage points over Ann Kirkpatrick, who actually currently holds Martha McSally's former seat. Looking at 2018, though, the Democrats were able to flip a seat in Arizona. This was Jeff Flake's previous seat. Martha McSally was defeated by Kyrsten Sinema, and Martha McSally ended up being the nominee again in 2020. And then Arizona ultimately went to the Democratic Party again, but not by a super significant margin. If you take a look at what the polling data had told us, Mark Kelley was supposed to do a lot better, finishing off with 54% of the expected vote by the polls, with Martha McSally with just around 44%. That was expected to be a 10-point margin of victory, but overall, that wasn't how things ended up being, and that was in the final few days of the campaign when things started drastically shifting towards Mark Kelley. The overall average was +5, but he certainly did not win by 5 points. He won by 2.4%. He was still able to win it. He was still able to flip it Democratic, but that means it's a target for Democrats, target for Republicans actually heading into 2022, because it was previously competitive. No reason why it wouldn't be competitive, especially in a year where the Republican Party is expecting to do better than they did in 2020 and better than they did in 2018, trying to replicate the election victories of 2010 and 2014. 2010 was when the Republicans won back the House. 2014 was when the Republicans won back control of the Senate. So that's Arizona. That's why Mark Kelley's race is currently competitive, and initial reaction to that is that it absolutely will be. We could see Mark Kelley being defeated. I think he is a very strong candidate. I think Martha McSally was just the wrong Republican at the wrong time in the state of Arizona, but if they can field someone who's similar to Ducey, similar to Flake, similar to Romney, as much as the Republican Party may not initially want them, they're going to have to vote for them eventually, and those are the only type of Republicans that can win statewide. Donald Trump's narrowing up in Arizona from 2012 to 2016 was an indicator the state was getting bluer, because every other state had shifted to the right. Practically every other state, Arizona shifted to the left. Looking at Arizona now, it shifted even more leftward and flipped to Joe Biden for the first time since 1996. So Arizona definitely is a state that the Democratic Party should be heavily invested investing in, but so should the Republican Party, at least for the time being. The next state is actually a race that was won by the Democrats in 2021, not in 2020, and this is Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock's seat in the state of Georgia. He's the first first black senator from Georgia, representing a state with a very high African-American constituency. And looking at the state's competitive nature, I mean, it was won by 2 percentage points back in 2021. I mean, I don't know why I say back. That was around a month ago, but it was won by the Democratic Party by 2 percentage points. For reference, Joe Biden won this state by 12,000 votes and around 0.24%. So Warnock did better than Biden, significantly better. In fact, Georgia went to Warnock more than Gary Peters won in Michigan, if you want to compare two races. Looking at the performance for Democrats in Georgia, Warnock's margin of victory was larger than Biden's in Wisconsin, larger than Biden's in Pennsylvania, larger than Biden's in Arizona, larger than Biden's in Georgia, larger than Trump's in North Carolina. The margin in the state of Georgia in the Senate runoff election in this specific Senate race was pretty strong. And Raphael Warnock is now one of the top targets because he's recently elected. He has a high approval rating, but things can change. And David Perdue looks like he's going to throw his hat in the ring, already filed to run for president. So not for president, for senator in this state. So he's keeping the options open as he has stated. But looking at Raphael Warnock's current position, I would say he might start out the initial leader if he does end up running against David Perdue. But looking at let's actually just go ahead and take a look at the 2020 Senate results so I can show you exactly what happened in this special election. Hopefully this is it. Warnock ended up, defeating Kelly Loeffler. I think looking at 2022, what we could see is Warnock doing the same exact thing with someone who's a Trump-backed candidate, someone who's so closely tied to Donald Trump, either Doug Collins or David Perdue. I think Warnock right now is the favorite to win this Georgia runoff race, or not Georgia runoff race, probably would end up being a runoff, but Georgia Senate election race. But you also have to keep in mind, it depends on the candidate, and that's why Republicans are trying to keep their options open. They're asking Perdue to run. They're considering Doug Collins running for either Senate or for governor, and we will see what happens. But for right now, it's on the target list, and it makes sense. This absolutely makes sense. I see no fault from the Republican Party at this one. The next one is actually a little surprising. I would say that I rate this state as safe currently. It definitely wouldn't be safe if, for instance, a super, super strong Republican was able to make this race competitive, but that's the state of Colorado. And for whatever reason, we are seeing Republicans think that this race is going to be competitive. The NRSC wants to win back the Senate through any means necessary, and I think that they're targeting states that might have been previously competitive but aren't in 2022. And that's why I think it's surprising. You see, Colorado has had this history of being rated as a competitive state. It was a state that was won by Biden, won by Clinton, won by Obama twice, actually. And looking at the Democratic performance, the last time the state actually went red on the presidential level was in 2004. And it went by a pretty large amount. It went by 8 points in 2004. But looking at the, actually, it might have not gone by 8 points. That might have been 2000. But I know it definitely did go to George W. Bush in 2004. And looking at the swing, now Joe Biden won this state by 13.5% in 2020. Against an incumbent Republican governor, the Democratic opposition candidate, John Hickenlooper, won by a very considerable amount, made it a likely state for the Democratic Party, an immediate pickup for the Democrats. And looking at Michael Bennet, while I don't think that this race would have been safe if we were talking about a complete red wave year, that has yet to be seen. We have yet to see that energy on the Republican Party side. There are a few special elections that will be great indicators of whether or not that's going to happen, but that lackluster Senate runoff performance doesn't exactly spell out landslide for Republicans in 2022. And looking at the history, let's go ahead and take a look back. In 2016, the last time this race was actually competitive, what we see in Colorado was that it was still won. Even though Donald Trump swung the entire country to the right, Michael Bennet still won by 6 percentage points in this state. That doesn't seem like a lot, but he outperformed Hillary Clinton. On top of that, what I'm expecting to see in 2022 is that this race is won by a safe amount. The same way that it was won by practically a safe amount in 2020. At the end of the day, Republicans just simply aren't competitive in Colorado anymore, but they might be trying to be. It's never, you should never give up completely on a state, but if we're talking about resources, it would make a lot more sense to spend the money on neighboring Arizona than it would be to spend money on neighboring Colorado. But for right now, we're going to, consider it a target because it is a target. That's where they were sending out ads initially in their first round of attack ads on these incumbent Democrats. The next state is actually on the West Coast as well, and it makes sense. After we finish with this final state, actually, we have two more states. They are not on the West Coast, but this state absolutely makes sense. I'm sure you can guess which one it is. It's not Washington. It's not Oregon. It's not California. It's Nevada. This is a state with Catherine Cortez Masto, someone who replaced Harry Reid back in 2016. In fact, we have the results right up here, and it was competitive. It is always competitive. She won with just winning one county, Las Vegas, around this region. Looking at the amount of votes, though, 600,000 votes, 700,000 votes out of one county alone. Look at their surrounding counties, 1,600 votes, 11,000 votes for the Republican, 2,000 votes, 600 votes, 13,000 votes. So looking at the surrounding redder counties, the reason why the Democrats can win with just one county is because it holds the majority of the population. And I think that looking at the election performance in 2016, I think this is actually a pretty strong result. Looking at the fact that the Democrats were able to win here, despite a lot of states voting to the right of where they did on the presidential level and the Senate result, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, looking at, North Carolina, Florida. But looking at Nevada, it actually didn't do that. What happened was Catherine Cortez Masto matched what Hillary Clinton did. They both won by 2.4%. Coincidentally, Joe Biden won in 2020 by 2.4%. So it definitely would be competitive, but they need the right Republican. This state is typically competitive, but almost always goes to the Democratic Party. It's sort of similar to North Carolina for the GOP. North Carolina went once, the same way Nevada went in 2004, but also looking at the results since then, in almost every single statewide race, Republicans have had unexpected luck, same way Democrats have had, but also it typically and almost always leans to the Democratic Party, the same way North Carolina almost always goes to the GOP. So it makes sense that it's a target, but I wouldn't exactly say that this would be the most easiest flip out of them all. I would say Georgia, Arizona, then possibly Nevada. So moving on from there, these next two states, they make sense. I would say actually, one of them makes sense, not the other, and you will see exactly what I mean. I'll start with the state that does make sense, and we'll finish off with the final state that doesn't. I think that the Republican committee here is trying to hold on to their competitive nature back in 2010. Let's go ahead and head back to 2010. I don't really think that this isn't much. I think this might be an easier way to get there, hopefully. If it doesn't bring us to 2010 Senate elections, I don't think that it will. Hopefully it does. It's not going to bring us there, is it? Oh, here we go. Great. I guess I did not do it right. I'm here. Okay, we're all good. So looking at this target, this is the state of New Hampshire. And the reason why it's being rated as competitive is not because it's New Hampshire. New Hampshire voted for Biden by 7 percentage points. There's no reason that it should be immediately labeled as a swing state, especially considering that Maggie Hassan defeated an electoral giant. I think Kelley was a very, very, very strong candidate. Just she wasn't strong enough to overcome Hillary Clinton's victory in New Hampshire. And, looking at this margin of victory, it certainly was close. 1,000 votes separated the two out of nearly, 700,000 votes in total. In fact, actually more than 700,000 votes in total. And looking at Maggie Hassan's victory, while it may have been small, she defeated Kelley. We can take a look at the 2010 results in New Hampshire. It was a, hold. She won every single county with 60% of the vote. It's the same way that people look at races that were won by very large amounts and saying, just because they won by 6 years ago by a very large amount, that their race should automatically be considered safe. No, that's not true. That is not how things work in America. 6 years is a long time for things to change, and that's exactly why the state flipped in 2016. And looking ahead to 2022, I do think that the Democrats could start out with the advantage, but the problem is not Kelley, not Maggie Hassan, but Chris Sununu, the incumbent governor, who has a higher approval rating amongst Democrats than he does Republicans. A 72% approval rating in the state. He looks to be targeting this 2022 Senate election. If you take a look at the candidates, the publicly expressed interest area, we have Kelley, who could actually make this race competitive as well, and Chris Sununu. And looking at the rating so far, we have Battleground, Lean D, and Likely D. And Cook typically leans in favor of the incumbents. But looking at the hypothetical polling, it does not spell out good news for Democrats. Looking at Maggie Hassan, when it comes down to a generic opponent, this means a Republican because she's the Democrat, she loses. And I know that these early indicator polls aren't always accurate, but the fact she's only getting 39%, I think, could be a warning sign. But I do think that she will immediately jump up once that undecided vote actually moves over. And also, governing is very different than representing a state on the legislative level in Congress. So we will see what happens, but it certainly is a target state and definitely should be at least invested in by the GOP. It would make 100% sense that they would do this because North Carolina, I don't know why I keep confusing the two. They're so different. New Hampshire is going to be competitive if Chris Sununu runs, if Kelley runs. I do think that those are the only two candidates that could win. And for right now, it looks like they are keeping their options open by targeting this senator. But this final state, I don't think makes any sense. I think that this is a grip onto the 2010 Senate election results. And I think that this is largely due to the fact that, this state used to be competitive and that it technically could be if we're talking about a complete red wave year like 2014 when the Republicans won the governorship here, or 2010 when the Republicans won the Senate election here. But I really just don't see it happening. So let's take a look at 2010. The 2010 United States Senate elections, we can get here. Wikipedia is pretty easy to manage, so let's go ahead and move over. This is the state of Illinois. And I know what you're thinking. Why is Illinois being rated as competitive? Why is Illinois being targeted? Well, 2010, Mark Kirk won this Senate race over the Democratic opponent. Looking at the state itself, it has completely, always been solid for the Democratic Party. In 2008, solid for the Democrats. And then 2 years later, ended up voting for a Republican. But the problem is, 2010 was a very different time. There needed to be a check and balance system on President Obama. Looking at his margin with the Democrats, what happened was in 2008, they won over 250 House seats. They won over 58 Senate seats. They had 59 to 60 depending on the week in 2009. Nearly a super majority. And looking at the margin, it made sense. Some people, even Democrats, would like to see a check and balance on the president, and it still wasn't enough. Even with states like Illinois flipping to the Republicans, Democrats still held the majority 53 to 47. So looking at the 2022 Senate map, I think that Republicans are hoping that they can get the same type of energy, but the problem is the majority is so slim that nobody's really worried about checks and balances. That's why Georgia went to the Democrats in 2021. Yes, Biden had been declared the winner. We had known for months that Biden was going to be president. But then looking at the results, they actually shifted to the left. It's not because they wanted a balance on Biden. It was more so because they wanted things to actually get done. And that's the problem. Things could have gotten done under Obama without 60 seats. Things cannot get done under Biden without a majority. So Illinois definitely won't be seeing a lot of crossover support like what we saw back in 2010. And also, 2010 was right after the Affordable Care Act. That was viewed as an overstep, as an overreach from the Obama administration, from the Democratic Party in Congress, and I don't think that's what we're going to see now. I think that that's something that has been agreed on by a lot of these Democratic voters, that what they've been promised is what is going to get done. And while Obama may have made many people angry through the Affordable Care Act, we have yet to see that exact moment for Joe Biden, especially since vaccination speed is picking up. Larry Hogan announced that we would be seeing in my home state an expedited process for vaccine distribution. So looking around the country is getting better. This is not the same type of environment. We're not going to see an immediate red wave year because Joe Biden is going to be enjoying an economic recovery. He's going to be enjoying COVID relief. He's going to be enjoying the eradication of a global pandemic by 2022. And that's going to make it, more likely that these Democratic candidates win because they're closely associated with Joe Biden. And looking at 2016, Tammy Duckworth actually won this race. And I know you recognize her name. I didn't want to mention it yet because it would have given away the state, and it would have given away, why I don't think it's considered to be a competitive race. Even in 2016 against a Republican incumbent, this entire region, not a single state in this entire region shifted to the left. Looking at Illinois, Tammy Duckworth won by a 15 percentage point margin against a Republican incumbent. The factor of the incumbency was there. In a year where this region benefited the Republican Party more, Mark Kirk simply just couldn't do enough to win the Senate race. He might have been able to do it in 2010, but in 2016 could not do enough. And looking at 2022, I get the Republican Party so desperately wants it to be competitive because outside of the 5 states already characterized, they really have nowhere else to go. But this seems to be like a waste of money. And Colorado also seems to be like a waste of money. Realistically, there are only 4 seats that the Democrats currently hold that will be truly competitive. For the Republicans, they have a very similar number. 2022 is probably one of the most evenly spread out Senate maps that I've seen covering on my channel. In fact, the most, I would say 2022, then 2020, then 2018 in terms of how the Democrats versus Republicans are expected to perform from best for the Democrats to worst for the Democrats. But looking at these 6 races, I will say New Hampshire absolutely makes sense. Georgia absolutely makes sense. Arizona absolutely makes sense. Nevada absolutely makes sense. But Colorado and Illinois, I'm iffy about it. I think that they are just definitely trying to grasp onto what used to be competitive, trying to make it competitive in the future. But at the end of the day, these are states that have just gone so far to the left that it's really difficult for me to see, even in a Republican best case scenario, that these states go to the Republicans. Colorado at best, Illinois in no situation. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for the 2022 Senate election videos. Had to figure out which one I was going to do there. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.